It is 95 degrees outside as I am recording this, and I'm having to turn off both my fan and my AC. So I really hope I can get this recording process done quickly. Alright. I did it again. Remember a couple videos ago when I talked about this album and I was like, oh, I'm so sad I missed out on this record when it came out. I did I did that again. And this time, I mean, no spoilers, but I like the album even more than that one. Look, I've been obsessed with this project in a way that I haven't been obsessed with for one in at least a year. So why, is the obvious question. What makes this album so great and so remarkable that I just had to make a full video on it? Well, we'll get into that. We will. I promise. It's gonna be okay. That's what we're doing. We're doing that right now. This is like a kind of a segue. We're skipping like the.
There's a pan on fire.
Before I get into a more specific track-by-track analysis of the album, I thought I'd go over the general feel and style of it. It is first and foremost an alternative R&B album, but that's certainly not all it is. Not by any means. It dabbles a lot in lo-fi, a bit in soul, even ambient pop here and there. My point, I guess, is that it's a very free-flowing record, sounding like one big jam sesh where musical elements are openly experimented with and thrown around. And honestly, this could be off-putting to some people. It's certainly not an inaccessible record by any means, but there are only a small handful of tracks that could be considered bangers or your usual radio singles or anything like that. And instead, a lot of the songs kind of occupy the space between demos and those bigger, more complete hits. It's kind of odd at first. If you're not an album listener, this project probably just won't be your cup of tea. While there certainly are songs off it I would still recommend, there are quite a few deep cuts on here that just won't work if you don't have the context of the entire record surrounding it. Now, it's important to note, that's not necessarily a criticism. In fact, this feeling of holism is in part of what has drawn me to listening to the album so frequently, despite only having discovered it like a few months ago. I just know not everyone is into that style of music where the songs are kind of allowed to float freely along and never really resolve, or at least not resolve on their own. Alright, I think that about covers the album in broader terms, at least. Let's get into a proper start on the individual songs. The opener, Big Mike's, is one of my favorite songs, just hands down. It is a really beautiful slow jam about falling in love with someone. Absolutely. While a lot of the songs on here take a lo-fi aesthetic, Big Mike's feels like a true live recording, like you are there in the room they're playing in, taking in the full atmosphere, emotion, and energy. From the slight yet somehow overwhelming hints of distortion on the back end, the persistent and driving rhythm, and Dijon's powerful, gruff yet sweet and smooth voice, it's fantastic. Lyrically as well, this track is kinda devastating yet really sweet at the same time. It's about feeling love in all its heart-wrenching totality, detailing Dijon's infatuation for his partner despite their ups and downs in the relationship. He describes just, being stunned by the beauty of his partner no matter what's going on. Through arguments, confusion, through triumphs, through everything. He just can't help but be overcome by her beauty. I just really like that. I think that's really sweet. Scratching, which is the title of the next track, continues the narrative of Big Mike's, which is a sort of tribute to Dijon's fiancée, Joanna. And as much as this song is a love song, it's also an apology. Dijon kinda sorts through a bunch of memories on this track, good or bad, and he tries to reckon with what it means for the future of him and Joanna. Which, now that I have that out in writing, it seems like a sort of thesis statement of the entire album. The struggle between guilt and shame and love and kind of where that leaves you. Anyways, what is the most off-putting about this track is for sure the structure. It rests mainly on this single piano loop, relying on that and Dijon's vocals throughout the majority of the track. But then at the end of the song, it starts to build and it culminates into this really almost euphoric collage of instruments before it just kind of ends. Yeah, like this track is just barely below 2 minutes long, and while on my first few listens I was put off by how abruptly this song drops any momentum it had going, I'm at a point where now I really appreciate how beautiful and sweet this moment is while it lasts, and that might be the point. And I'll actually touch more on this later, but there is an extended version of scratching in the Absolutely short film, and that in itself is also pretty fantastic. Many Times is next, and God, this song is so good. This song is so good. The vocals are on point, the drums add such a driving force, the piano solo at the end is super fun and bright. Literally every element of this song is perfect. I can't show you how I properly feel about the song without including in the video me running around my room dancing like an idiot. The energy of this song is so powerful, so potent, it's so light and fun, and on top of that, it's one of the most accessible tracks on the album, so go listen to it, please. Also, in the process of making this video, it also got included on Obama's summer playlist, so take that as you will. And one more thing about the song is the transition from Many Times into the next song, Annie, is really fantastic. Like, just give this a listen. It's such a simple and yet effective transition, and it just makes me happy when I hear it. It also helps that Annie is yet another amazing performance. It's another R&B slow jam that continues the lyrics and themes of Many Times, but this time with a more purposeful and gentle tone. For a song about what I assume is a breakup, it's so tender and caring, and those horns added in build to a wonderful, wonderful climax. I also feel structurally it's one of the more satisfying moments on the album, with there being multiple distinct changes in instrumentation and vocal style. The euphoric group chants contrasted with more barren moments between Dijon and a lone guitar. The passion in the song is tangible, the production is a perfect mix of spacious and minimal, yet upfront and bombastic when it needs to be. And while sure, as a set-alone song, it may not work as well as Big Mike's or Many Times, to me it's one of the most memorable moments on the album. After that is Noah's highlight reel, which is one of a few more ambient cuts on the record. It's this folky combination of country and R&B that feels more than ever like sifting through an old collection of photos and having the memories wash over you. Added into the mix are a whole bunch of sound effects, from the distant murmurs of conversation to full-on cheering crowds. Along with this, Dijon plays with some pretty interesting vocal manipulation, and his overall vocal presentation is incredibly unique and beautiful. So while, I'll be honest, it's not one of the most memorable tunes for me personally, it holds a lot of incredibly unique and interesting ideas that you'd be really hard-pressed to find on any other artist's body of work. And there still are moments on this that really hit me and lodge in my brain, the heartfelt plea of, "If you love me, let me know," being one of them. The dress comes in right after, this being one of a very few cuts that doesn't really feel lo-fi in any way. Instead, this is just a full-on dance ballad that is totally cleanly produced, and it's probably the song you know from this album if you've heard any of them. And while at first the abrupt style change kind of felt off to me, like so many other things with this record, it's only grown on me. It totally works as this really beautiful, low-key, and super danceable bop that doesn't trade off any of the trademark emotion or core theming of the album. It's all about reigniting the spark in a relationship with one more night out on the town, and the aesthetic it goes for reinforces that perfectly. After this is a handful of more ambient cuts, those being God and Wilson and Did You See It? And while these may not be cuts that grip to everyone, for me they've become highlights off the album, although I think I've said that about pretty much every song so far. God and Wilson is this amazing serene cut about shame and fearing that you're not a good enough person, which once again reinforces the overall concept of memories, love, and overcoming your past mistakes. By the end of the track, it builds into this pretty satisfying, if understated, mountain of distorted guitars, which then breaks down further into a disparate collage of instruments with multiple passes of Dijon's vocals overlaid, creating this incredibly trippy and disorienting feeling. Which actually very naturally fits into the next song, Did You See It?, which is all about tripping off mushrooms and seeing a UFO. Which, just saying that out loud, it makes it seem really goofy, but honestly, it's a very grounded and heartfelt take on that premise. It really showcases the emotional vulnerability of being together with someone you love and experiencing something you can't really explain. It's ethereal, it's short-lived, it's beautiful, and while maybe I wish it was a bit longer, I really can't say I'm left dissatisfied with the quick run it has. Continuing that kind of road trip narrative Did You See It had going on, Talk Down comes in with a dance breakbeat and an understated dance pop vibe. This is a little bit of a pick-me-up actually after the last couple of songs, being a much more traditionally structured and conventional sounding song. But Dijon still finds ways to experiment with some of that vocal manipulation from Noah's highlight reel coming, along with some incredible chorus vocals that make it sound like you're being surrounded by the song itself. It's also just a really sweet song. The passion with which Dijon sings about wanting to listen to his partner at all times is incredibly sweet, as well as just kinda cute. This is definitely one of the tracks that will get stuck in your head over and over, and at barely 2.5 minutes, it's a pretty quick and sweet deal. We're actually nearing the end now with Rodeo Clown, which is the song where Dijon's vocals take the most presence on the entire album. While there are some guitars underlining the whole experience, the mix is much more minimal to allow Dijon, who is more raw and unrefined than ever, to really belt his heart out on this thing. And no, when I say his vocals are unrefined, I mean not that they're bad by any means. No, instead it sounds like they're about to, give out. He is so emotionally invested in this song, in this person, in the narrative of the track, that he's on the verge of tears just trying to make it through. Speaking of the narrative, actually, this song is seemingly about someone who keeps getting stood up by their lover, yet keeps insisting that they're meant to be together. It's played in a way that kind of blurs the line of Dijon's character being a sympathetic one, and almost a semi-sinister figure. As Dijon put it himself, he formed a character that was unfavorable and unreliable. It's a pretty devastating track, with him eventually bursting into tears partway through the song, which I'm pretty sure was actually a genuine outburst if that interview I referenced was correct. And then, once again, I'd like to point out the transition from this track to the next, with this song ending with I love you, I love you, and then the next song, fittingly called End of Record, starting with loving you to the moon. I just think that's nice. End of Record, by the way, is the song that by far grew on me the most. It's a sort of mix between Noah's highlight reel and Big Mike's in terms of style, being a mix of ambient music, R&B, and dance. And man, the communal feeling of this song is tangible. The people talking and singing along in the back, the rustling of clothes and the clinking of glasses, the casual gossip and chatter, it underscores that feeling of being present in the studio that has been persistent since the first track on this album. And God, the chorus. I've used the word euphoric a few times in this review, but I think this song is the track that earns the descriptor the most. Everyone in the room singing, clapping, and stomping along to this beautifully simple, melodic chorus. It makes me emotional and nostalgic in this weird way that I can't explain. It's melancholic for sure, a bit somber, but also very hopeful, beautiful, and cathartic. I think it drives home the point, the message and the vibe of the record of a whole, of just being this nostalgic trip through past memories, good and bad. Finally, there's credits, which, like it sounds, is a little moment to just sit back and think about what you just listened to. And as a track, it's a little goofy, to be honest. It definitely feels abrupt in a lot of ways, but it also makes sense because of that, if that in itself makes sense. It's a triumphant and even kind of nonsensical ending to an album full of pure, raw emotion that I don't think has been really captured in many other places. And capping it off with one last dash of unpredictability seems pretty fitting, I guess. So that's the album as it is, and you know what? I'm in love with it. It tugs on emotional strings that very few artists have managed to tug at for me, and I think the more you absorb and immerse yourself in it, the more you'll appreciate it. This being said, though, remember that short film I kind of mentioned earlier? I want to talk about that as well, because I think it does add a lot to the overall experience of the album. So let's do that. Let's talk about that. Let's roll the tape.
There's a sparkling away.
First of all, if you've gotten to this point and haven't watched the short film or listened to the music, do that maybe. The album is only 30 minutes long and the film only 25, but if you don't want to dedicate that time just yet, just go listen to Big Mike's or maybe the live version of it available alongside the short film on the YouTube channel. Okay? Okay, cool. If there's one thing that the Absolutely short film proves to me, though, it's that the album, as disconnected and hazy as it can be, is held together by one experience. The experience of going through but also creating art about relationships, failed and successful romances, and reckoning with them and finding love regardless. The short film is loosely structured like a series of live performances, all from the same room, kinda. And as the show progresses, we see the emotional and mental toll the sheer force of the music has on the people playing it. The energy on display during some of these performances is absolutely electric. It is an intensely emotional and loving environment, but one that gives way to the mental struggles that exist under the surface of all the songs they play. The most obvious example of this is during the Rodeo Clown performance, where Dijon, seemingly totally drunk, goes on a rampage through his set. His band that accompanies him throughout the rest of the performances isn't even there, he's just singing along to his own song. It's overall a really artful and beautiful way to showcase, but also reinvent and recontextualize the whole album. And some of the songs on here are genuinely helped by their even more raw aesthetic. For example, the 6-minute version of Big Mike's is an incredible rendition of a song that was already my favorite off the album. And then the use of credits with the shot of Dijon running off to God knows where is incredibly beautiful, and I think better utilized there than it was on the album proper. And besides the musical components, there are obviously other things to praise about the short film. I love the cinematography and color grading. Everything feels so warm and hazy, while still capturing that raw vibe you come to expect from the music presented. There are also a lot of other incredible details, like how Big Mike seems to be played in a real room while the rest of the songs are performed in a recreation of that room. Or maybe I'm stupid and they just closed off a wall for the first song, they had it open for the rest, but regardless, I think it's a really subtle but effective way of capturing the emotional vulnerability of the project.
Would you win a scould? Would you win a track?
This has been a video I've been meaning to make for about 2 months, actually more now that I'm actually recording it. It's been at least 4 months, maybe 5? Oops. But there's just been something indescribable about this album that I haven't been able to capture in writing alone. It's this energy, this soul that the music possesses that keeps me coming back to it over and over and over, making me like it more and more with each consecutive listen. And I know that that is not an experience that everyone has had with the record. I've seen many people play off the looser ends and hazy moments as unsatisfying or unfulfilling. But no matter what, I can't really see any of these quote-unquote issues as actual problems. To me, every decision here feels purposeful, beautiful, and meaningful. And while the album isn't necessarily perfect, I'd say it's pretty damn near it. The more I've looked at this album, studied it, and looked into interviews about its creation and its creator, the more I'm enamored with it. The more I am overcome with pure emotion. Not any particular emotion, or even mix of emotions that I can properly describe, but just emotion. And I think that for the kind of music that Dijon is trying to make and has been making for a while, that's sort of the end goal, isn't it? So if it isn't clear, give this project a listen and watch the short film, or at least the live performances from it. And let me know what you think of it if you want to. This has been one of the best musical gems I've found, and I hope I've done it justice with this review. Yeah, that's it. See ya. Bop, 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 bop. God, I'm dying. I cannot wait to turn this fan back on. Incredible.
I had